So our first panel for today is Getting Our House in Order, the Arts Respond to Climate Change. And I'm delighted to introduce an incredible panel. Our chair will be Judith Knight, founder and ex-artistic director of Artsadmin, because she's still the founder. An artistic provocation from Rita Marcalo, who's the director of Instant Dissidence and the creative force behind Dancing with Strangers. Next we have Carla, a Green Party councillor in Bristol, and in 2018 she proposed the first climate emergency motion in Europe. And we have Chenine Bhathena, the artistic director of Coventry City of Culture. And at one point we will hopefully be joined by Ruth Ben-Tovim from Culture Declares Emergency. Over to you, Judith.
Thank you. Thank you, Junelyn and Marcus. Thank you, IBT, for having us and programming this most important conversation. Last time I was here at IBT was 2 years ago on a panel talking about whether live art could unfuck the world. That was 2017. Well, I have to say, despite our best efforts, we haven't achieved a state of unfuckedness, have we? In fact, we could be argued that we're even more fucked than ever. Just to start this debate on a really optimistic note. I've attended and presented at lots of discussions over many years about the role of arts and climate change and the climate emergency. Sorry, that's the terminology now. But the timing of this summit does seem to be quite something. XR, here, there and everywhere, the school strikes, some 4 million people simultaneously on the streets a couple of weeks ago. Culture Declares, the RSC and the National Theatre both abandoning fossil fuel sponsorship. 2 more down, still a few to go. Funding permitting, Artsadmin and Julie's Bicycle Season for Change will happen in 2020 to coincide with the Glasgow COP26 talks. Could this be the moment when things finally turn, when the arts takes a massive lead on this? And if so, is it in time or have we missed the boat? So here we are in Bristol and to talk about this issue, the team have been introduced. So I think we're all going to be as provocative as we can and in the hope of lots of questions to lead to some brilliant and urgent answers and even more importantly, some actions. I wrote a blog for this event, which is on the IBT Summit website, and began with a mention of the book I was reading by David Wallace Wells called The Uninhabitable Earth, which opens with the line, "It is worse, much worse than you think. The slowness of climate change is a fairy tale, perhaps as pernicious as the one that says it's not happening at all." I'd been avoiding reading this book for a long time. I'd seen it in the bookshops for fear of ending up in the deepest despair. But the nice man in Waterstones said it had a slightly more positive ending. I haven't got to the ending yet. We'll see, but I'm not holding my breath. What was rather shocking to read that about 1/3 of carbon emissions in the atmosphere have been put there during the time since I founded Artsadmin back in 1979. This wasn't a time of ignorance about climate emergency. This is when we knew. As Wallace Wells puts it, we now have engineered as much ruin knowingly as we ever managed in ignorance. I stepped down, I hate the word retired, from Artsadmin in July after 40 amazing years of working with some extraordinary artists, all of whom had something important to say. Over the last 15 years or so, we worked with a lot of artists focusing especially on the subject of environment, climate change, the climate emergency, and through a wonderful long-term EU-funded partnership, Imagine 2020, we produced the 2 Degrees Festival, Arts, Activism and Climate. 40 amazing years. I was so lucky to have been able to produce and commission some of these thoughtful, provoking and challenging projects that raised the issue of the climate emergency and hopefully inspired people to act. These were special projects that I was so privileged to have been involved with, so proud of Artsadmin's role in making them happen, so positive that their contribution to changing attitudes, inspiring action, doing good. I was convinced that our role was a brilliant contribution to the whole fight against climate change. The arts can make a difference. I still believe they can, but of course this is a provocation. So to all those who ask me over the years, how can you prove that anything you do changes anything? I used to reply, if we didn't do it, we'd achieve nothing. But now, we should be taking a long look at ourselves. Here are 4 provocative questions I have, which maybe we can answer together. The first one, however beautiful the project, however challenging, however life-changing, however inclusive and engaging, can we continue to allow artists and arts workers to fly across the world to create and tour it? Solo artists, large theatre and dance companies, orchestras too. And the international festival merry-go-round of curators and promoters, festival directors, the artistic jet set, meeting up in bars and venues and restaurants as they choose their programmes. Can we justify this any longer, now that we're on the brink? Can we even be on the lower slopes of the moral high ground if we don't change our ways? My even suggesting this is a bit like Europe and America telling the least polluting continents of Africa and Asia that they have to stop buying cars and fridges. We've had our fun, but now they have to stop. After 40 years at Artsadmin working all over the world on wonderful, meaningful artist projects and collaborations, creating long-standing relationships, learning and sharing, and visiting amazing places, the thought of me suggesting this to a younger generation of artists and producers, that they have to stop flying, well, I can hear the response. But maybe this is what we have to do. After all, Jerome Bell, for one, has committed not to fly. I think the director, Katie Mitchell, there are many more. But what does that mean for the international relations of creativity, especially with the monster that is Brexit? Would a cultural sector flight ban be putting a death sentence on this currently benighted country, sending it on the way to becoming an isolated small blue island of Tories eating spam and baked beans? What would it mean for the incomes of artists who earn a pittance in this country and only a bit more of a pittance abroad? Who am I, a retired old has-been, to tell young artists to curtail, to possibly ruin their emergent careers by staying put, when my generation is the cause of the mess we're in? There's no one way to combat climate emergency, but are we wasting energy on money thinking the arts can make any difference at all? Are we just speaking to ourselves, preaching to the choir, making ourselves feel better? Do we change anything? And if we're not making or producing art, what else should we be doing? Are the movements, XR, Culture Declares, the school strikes, the way forward? Of course, they all have art in the making, in the protesting, in the signs and the images and the actions. And of course, that art imprints itself on the minds of the watchers and gets noticed on the TV screens, the social media. It is important, but what is it really achieving? Are we just too gentle? Do we need to be much more political? Are we concentrating too much on inspiring people to take individual action and not enough on condemning the real villains? And we know there are some. This week in The Guardian, and I'll defend that liberal elite newspaper forever, are publishing a massive expose of the oil companies and how for decades they've tried to hide the truth. Currently, just 20 international firms are behind 1/3 of all global carbon emissions. It's breathtaking, actually. In the news this week, Shell are to increase the production of oil with an additional 7 million barrels per day over the next decade. That's a 35% increase by 2030, when we're supposed to be heading for a carbon neutrality with a 45% reduction. Thursday morning's Today programme on Radio 4 had an interview with a spokesperson from Shell UK, who, despite all this, still insists they are part of the solution. They've launched a very clever marketing scheme to get petrol buyers to join a rewards scheme to get their petrol purchases offset and receive a personal carbon statement. What's not to love? Just keep buying the petrol and they'll keep extracting it. The scheme is costing Shell, I think he said, £10 million from their total UK sales of £6 billion a year, 1/600th of their UK profit. And sadly, it's not just those well-known climate deniers who show their antagonism to the fight with XR and everybody else. There are swathes of horrible comments about XR all over social media from the political left and right. Accusations of XR being too white, which is probably right, it must diversify in every way, but also too scruffy, too crusty, Boris Johnson, too hippie, too studenty, too pensionary, too posh. Normally you accuse richer people of not caring. So when they do, whether they're the liberal elite or not, I applaud them for being prepared to be arrested for the sake of future generations and countries closer to the climate emergency than we are. In Rome the other day, there was a hanging an effigy of Greta Thunberg hanging from a building. What are these people like? Greta Thunberg says our house is on fire. Our house, our only house, our Earth. The pale blue dot in the photograph taken on NASA's Voyager 1 in 1990 that inspired astronomer Carl Sagan's famous words. Look again at that dot. That's here, that's home, that's us. On it, everyone you love, everyone you know, everyone you've ever heard of, every human being that ever was, lived out their lives, the aggregate of our joy and suffering, thousands of confident religions, ideologies, economic doctrines, every hunter and forager, every hero and coward, every creator and destroyer of civilization, every king and peasant, every young couple in love, every mother and father, hopeful child, inventor and explorer, every teacher of morals, every corrupt politician, every superstar, every supreme leader, every saint and sinner in the history of our species lives there on a mote of dust suspended on a sunbeam. And that's without mentioning the millions of extraordinary animal species that share this pale blue dot with us that we're doing quite an efficient job of exterminating on a daily basis. This is our planet. This is the only one we have. We have to act, and we have to act more quickly. I'm sorry if this has been a pessimistic opening. Everybody always feels you're supposed to have an optimism to change the world, but I think we need to just ground ourselves in where we are, and hopefully, out of those provocations and this brilliant panel here, we can have some positive thoughts about our move. We will be connecting with those uncooperative crusties in London in a short time, but I'm now going to pass you over to Rita. Thank you very much.
So, hi. I am a dancer, and for a while now my dance has been listening to the world, and it has been listening to the climate and the biodiversity emergency that we find ourselves in. And in that listening, my dance has been changing. It has been evolving, and it has been adapting. So now I'm going to take you through 3 of the latest adaptations of my dance. First adaptation. My dance is now land-based. In the past, my dance flew. It first flew from Portugal to the UK, and then from the UK, my dance flew as far as Chicago in one direction and as far as Ukraine in the other. These days, my dance doesn't fly. It has lost its wings. It has evolved to be land-based. It has decided to only travel as far as it's possible to travel by land, on public transport. I do not own a car, or by sea. Last year, I danced my way out of England, a country where I lived and worked for 24 years. I danced on foot my way out of England into my new home in County Tipperary in Ireland. This dance started in Guildford, and it ended 2 months later in Clough Jordan, a small village in County Tipperary. It now takes me 12 hours to travel by land and sea to be here with you today. And it takes me 3 days to travel from Ireland to Portugal, which is the country that I'm originally from and where most of my family still live. The biggest learning that this adaptation has brought to me is how long geography takes. The duration of geography. Something that, of course, being born into this age of fast travel and flying, I had never considered before. Second adaptation. From ecosystem thinking to ecosystem thinking. My dance, for a while, has been feeling like it no longer wants to be mine. It no longer wants to attach itself to a self. My work. I have used this expression for the past 20 years to talk about what I do. And the word my in that expression is gradually being replaced by the word the work that needs doing right now, the dance that needs to be danced right now. The dance that needs dancing right now, rather than a dance that this supposed self called Rita wants to do to fulfill her artistic needs. So I'm feeling like I'm becoming a dancer in some other choreography that I'm not deciding, that I'm not in control of. But it's a choreography responding to the current needs of the planet, of humanity, and other beings. Now, in this adaptation, my dance is aware that age and longevity and class and ethnicity and opportunity are factors. My dance has been so incredibly fortunate to have had 20 years of fulfilling those individual artistic needs. But the work that needs doing will look very different to an emerging artist who is just beginning to find their own artistic voice, or to the working class choreographer who last year in Nottingham said to me, "You know, Rita, I'm just beginning to apply the word artist to what I do, because in my community that is frowned upon." So in this moving into ecosystem thinking, my dance is also wanting to place its individual needs aside. My dance is wanting to place its individual needs aside for a greater choreography, but at the same time, my dance is wanting to support the choreography of those for whom the work that needs doing is different from mine. Third adaptation. My dance is wanting to do a duet between the idea of the personal being political and the idea of the personal being planetary. In her arguing for the interconnection between colonization violence and planetary violence, the Indian ecofeminist Vandana Shiva writes, "The extermination of biological diversity and of indigenous cultures that know how to live in peace with Mother Earth is part of one and the same extinction, one interconnected war against life. Ecocide and genocide are one indivisible process, and they began with the idea of colonization of the Earth as the, in quotation marks, civilizing mission of a, in quotation marks, superior race." So when I read Vandana Shiva, I want to dance this duet. I want to dance this duet between the political and the planetary. And I want to dance it with those of you who can teach me this duet. So I've told you about these adaptations that my dance is doing at the moment. But what dances are coming out of these adaptations? What shape are the new dances taking? So I'm just going to give you 3 examples. So the first dance that is arising out of these adaptations is a project that I call the No-Fly Artist Database. This is a project that I want to set up around the planet, where those of us who are committed no-fly artists go on this database. And so one day, for instance, somebody I might get an opportunity to do something in Chile, but I will refuse that opportunity, and instead I will contact another no-fly artist on that database from Chile, and together we will create the project, and we can split the fee. And one day, hopefully, somebody from Sydney will have an opportunity to perform in Ireland, but instead of flying to Ireland, they might find me on the database. Another idea, another dance that's arising out of these adaptations is a project that I call the My Work Disobedience Project. This project invites artists to disobey their work. And if we all disobeyed our work just for 1 year in one funding jurisdiction, so let's say everybody in England, you disobey your work in terms of your own artistic vision, and we just applied to the Arts Council of England for projects that have a civic element to them. For instance, a group of artists in a community decide that they are going to create food sovereignty, and they're going to spend 1 year planting their gardens, planting fruit trees, and that's going to be their project. If all of us did that in 1 year, even if those projects are very much out there, the Arts Council is going to have to fund something. The programmers are going to have to program something. They're not going to spend 1 year saying no. And if they say no to the first people that apply, we can have a system whereby those people that initially don't get the funding will get the funding through the second and third and fourth people who do. We can share it out. And in doing that, the My Work Disobedience Project could put pressure on the funding system to change. And then the final idea, the final provocation to you, is a planetary book club. This idea that we can every month read a book, and it doesn't have to be a book, it could be a story, a legend, a fairy tale that exists in oral history from anywhere in the world, and we could Zoom each other 1 day a month to discuss it. And in this way, I am an XR member, and I love what XR is doing, and I love all the publications by people like Rob Hopkins and George Monbiot, but I think there are other stories that are not, and other solutions that are not being considered right now, because either they don't exist in book format, or they exist in languages that we can't access here. And so we could help each other, we could translate, we could connect, and we don't have to reinvent the wheel. We could just learn from other people who have always been connected to a sustainable way of living. So anyway, this is me finishing by saying this is my provocation to you. And if you want to join me in any of these dances, because I can't make them happen on my own, if you want to join me, or if you want to support me in making them happen, then do get in touch with me, and yeah, let's dance them together. So that's all. Thank you.
I love the idea of a no-fly artist database. Maybe that's a real first practical solution. We're passing over now. Thank you very much. To Carla. I think she's already been introduced, but here she goes.
Thank you. Late last year, I proposed a motion to Bristol City Council. It called on the Mayor to declare a climate emergency, to commit the city to go carbon neutral by 2030, to lobby national government for the powers and funding necessary, and to report back in 6 months with a decarbonisation plan. Back then, I had no idea the impact my motion would have. It passed unanimously with support from all parties on the council, which, frankly, based on our experience of the previous 10 or 12 years of Green councillors, we didn't expect. Within weeks, Green Party councillors on other councils were following suit, including London Assembly member Caroline Russell, who got the Mayor of London on board. Then councillors from other parties gradually started proposing them too. And as I speak, over 200 UK councils have declared climate emergencies, plus the Scottish Government, Welsh Assembly, UK Parliament, and many other organisations. I want to show you a little animation that will give you a visual sense of it. This animation runs from October 2016 to now. It shows the first few declarations in the world. There's one on the map so far down in Australia, and a couple that appear on the west coast of the US and in the northeast of the US. I think they're there now. Those were the ones that inspired me. Those are the ones I heard about in the summer last year. And then you'll see as we hit November, there we go, suddenly all of these coloured dots appearing all over the UK, Western Europe, all over Canada and the US, and a few elsewhere in Australia and Southeast Asia. The zeitgeist was with us. some combination of the alarmingly hot summer we had just had, the early actions of the Extinction Rebellion movement, and the IPCC report that came out last autumn describing the horrendous impacts of even just 1.5 degrees of warming. People other than scientists and environmentalists were starting to get that climate change is not just an issue, it's the most serious threat facing humanity. But what impact has my climate emergency motion actually had, aside from influencing others? What impact has it actually had on changing policies and reducing carbon emissions? I have to be honest, that is much harder to define. I'll start with Bristol because that's where I know best. In Bristol, my motion caused the Mayor to declare a climate emergency, it required him to do so, and to formally adopt the goal of Bristol becoming carbon neutral by 2030. He published a report in July this year announcing a new Environmental Sustainability Board and an expert advisory committee on climate change. The report set out some actions that the Council will do, and it identified areas where additional government action is needed and commits to putting that case to government. This report was a positive step, and I'm proud to have kick-started it. It was great to see that it contained several green proposals that we had put forward, such as an annual carbon budget, which is an idea we stole from Oslo City Council, requiring all new homes to be carbon neutral and putting solar panels on existing council houses. By the way, if you want to see all of the proposals that the Green Councillor Group put forward prior to the Mayor's report, you can find it online. Just Google Bristol Green Party Change Starts Now, or you can go to my Twitter and it's the top pinned tweet. But ultimately, the Mayor's response just wasn't a sufficiently emergency-oriented response. It doesn't go far enough and it doesn't go fast enough. Crucially, it isn't a decarbonisation plan at all. It is a plan outlining how they're going to set up new boards and new committees and new structures to produce a plan in a year or two. And meanwhile, there was no sign that the Labour Mayor here in Bristol and the Labour-run council had incorporated an understanding of the emergency into other aspects of their work, which of course is essential. So despite having declared a climate emergency, the council and or the Mayor still support the proposed huge expansion of Bristol Airport. They still plan to keep their pension investment in fossil fuels and angrily turn down Green Party attempts to do otherwise, even though the union supported us. The council is resistant to suggestions to introduce more pedestrianisation in the city centre or a congestion charge. And the council is proposing major new house building in areas at high risk of flooding. To be clear, last year, the UN IPCC said that we have at best 12 years to take bold action to avert climate catastrophe. Since then, one of those years has already passed. So while there is a place for strategies, plans, boards, absolutely, this is a time for emergency action and it has to be threaded through everything. I was speaking recently to a climate expert whose partner is a fireman. She had learnt a lot from him about what an emergency response actually looks like. They don't wait for one task to be completed before starting the next. In a serious fire, they need to put up the ladder, get the hoses going, send firefighters inside the building, call for backup and clear the public out of the way, and they do as many of those as possible at the same time. So I'm worried that many of the politicians and organisations that have declared a climate emergency don't fully get it. That they declared because they wanted to jump on a bandwagon, get some positive press, and look like they're doing something. Some of the motions declared even omitted any kind of deadline for reaching carbon neutrality or set one that was far too late. There are some shining exceptions to that rule, though. Stroud in Gloucestershire, not far from here, was way ahead of the curve. The council is already carbon neutral in its own operations, and they are much further ahead than most councils in decarbonising the whole district. And don't get me wrong, it is valuable that Parliament declared a climate emergency, although it is worth noting the crucial difference that was Parliament, not government. Conservative MPs were whipped to find something useful to do in their constituencies that day, so the vast majority of them were absent from the chamber, when that vote went through. The ones who voted it were almost entirely in opposition, and they don't currently, sadly, have the power to do anything about it. I sound like such a misery guts. I'm really sorry about that. But I don't want to sugarcoat an answer that isn't actually great news. In a nutshell, I'll say this. When I wrote my climate emergency motion, I didn't know that it would start a movement. If I had, maybe I could have written it differently to try and prevent people watering it down. I think that the hundreds of climate emergency declarations are undoubtedly a good thing, because they put climate on the agenda, near the top of the agenda for the first time in a long time. And they give the people like us who do get it a stick to beat the people and organisations who don't, whenever they do something that doesn't align with the emergency they have declared. But making a declaration on its own clearly isn't enough. It must be followed by urgent action, and I hope that all of the organisations that have declared can work together, both to avoid reinventing the wheel and also to lobby national government for the powers and funding that we need from them. Now I want to turn to you and ask the question that is at the heart of this event. What can the arts do in the face of climate change? And I've got a one-word answer: narrative. Human beings are a storytelling species. We understand the world, the past, the present, and the future through stories. And at the moment, there simply isn't a compelling, widely understood story of a future, a version of the future, where climate change happens, because it is going to happen. We've passed that point now. We are committed to a certain amount of climate change. So we need a vision of the future where climate change happens, but where we prevent the worst impacts. We build a better future, survive and thrive. In the shared imagination, the options we've got so far seem to be a future of hoverboards and flying cars where science solves everything and climate change has magically disappeared. Spoiler alert, that's not happening. An apocalyptic future where our race dies out completely, a back to the Stone Age future where we lose most modern aspects of life, or a back to the 1930s fascist future. There have been attempts to outline the kind of future I'm talking about. If you're interested, I recommend to you the Transition Towns movement. Check out transitionnetwork.org. Beacons, which is a little-known book, a selection of short stories compiled by the author Gregory Normington, which attempts to tell sort of negative, positive and neutral imaginations of the future. And George Monbiot's recent TED Talk all about narrative, called The New Political Story That Could Change Everything. But none of those have remotely hit the mainstream. So my challenge to you is, yes, as Extinction Rebellion are calling for, do commit to tell the truth, perhaps as part of Culture Declares Emergency, who we'll be hearing from in a moment. But then we need you as artists to tell us a positive story that we can believe in about the future, so that our hearts, as well as our minds, know where we're aiming for. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you, Carla. So there's a challenge, artists out there. It has been increasingly, well, obviously really difficult over many years for this topic to be dealt with by artists. I think visual artists have probably done more on it than writers, but of course it's the hardest thing to grasp, but there's a challenge. Brilliant, thank you, Carla. So over to Chenine, next speaker. Thank you very much.
Hi, everyone. It's great to be here to discuss this important topic and really think about the vital role of pioneering artists and creative programs. I suppose when I joined Coventry City of Culture 2021 last year, I think one of the first set of questions that we really started to ask is, what is a UK City of Culture, or what could it be, rather than looking backwards to what other people and what other cities have done with it, if you like. It's still a very new idea, I suppose, in our country, and there's a real opportunity, and there's no blueprint, so there's a real opportunity to really think differently and imaginatively and creatively about the responsibility we have as the leaders of such a major programme with such huge investment and such important stakeholders, to really think about the change that we can bring about through our programme. And I was really struck when I went to Melbourne earlier this year, and I was talking to people from the City Council, and they were saying in their new cultural strategy, in their new city strategy, rather than having a cultural strategy inside it, they just put a call out to artists and said, come and help us improve our city, make our city better, make change happen in our city. You know, really understanding the role that artists can play in cities. So I suppose picking up on what Rita said, you know, put your art to one side for a while and actually bring your artistic, creative minds and abilities and help us with the challenge that we have ahead of us. And I was really struck by that and really thought that's something we really could kind of embrace as we move forward with City of Culture. And Coventry is the UK's only city of peace and reconciliation, but has always been a place of activists and pioneers and a truly international city, really with a very strong global footprint, really trying to think about our role in the world, but also be inspired and led by global issues and challenges. It's a city of innovation and invention, and of course, deep-set creativity, built by craftsmen. There's a huge amount of creativity that runs through the foundations of the city. So I suppose hosting the City of Culture programme at this point in the history of the world is particularly poignant, and it's really important, I think, that we embrace the world around us and don't just put on a nice fun festival, even though I'm sure it will be lovely and you'll all have a great time when you come. But it's a real chance to think about the narrative that Carla's talking about and think about the story we want to tell, about the identity of our city, but also our nation. And really think about what's going on in the world right now. You know, like many other cities in the country, our communities have been hit really hard by austerity. Over 50% of our citizens say they have mental health issues. 1 in 3 children live in poverty. And we have one of the most polluted roads in the Midlands, according to Friends of the Earth. And so all these things really contribute to the life chances of our citizens. And we have this really amazing moment to think about how we can change some of that or make some change happen or effect some change. So I think with this huge investment coming in and as we're developing this major cultural programme, I really feel this responsibility we have to make a positive impact in the city. And when we won the bid, the way that we really approached it was really to look at data about our city, to look at kind of who we are and kind of where the issues and challenges are. And as we move forward, our programme is completely outcome driven. So everything we do is about how we make change happen in our city. And so this means that we will deliver, I hope, a positive impact for the city and the region, and really evolve this notion of City of Culture, its wider role, and the influencing power, I suppose, that we might have on our partners and our stakeholders, to help think about how we can change attitudes and behaviour, and to connect nationally and internationally. And I think in Coventry, I'm in a city where people really care. Our citizens care about their neighbours, both at home and around the world. The legend of Lady Godiva was all about, you know, this amazing woman standing up against taxes on poor people. Having been devastated by war in the Second World War ourselves, we reached our hand of friendship across Europe and the world and built the whole concept of twin cities, invented that concept. And in the late 70s, early 80s, we invented the whole notion of two-tone music to combat racism, bringing our artists coming together across punk and reggae to really promote harmony and stand up to apartheid. Jerry Dammers, an amazing lyricist and artist from our city, wrote the song Free Nelson Mandela, and actually, arguably, you could say that resulted in a major world leader being released from a terrible prison that he was in. So I think we've got this real heritage and history in our city to make a difference. Another amazing person from our city was Mo Molam, who led on the Good Friday Peace Agreement. So we've got this real heritage there. So my provocation really is, what is the role of a major cultural programme like the one that I'm leading to really activate citizens around these big social and political agendas and pioneer some new kind of global solutions that can be embraced by partners and others around the world. And I think more than ever now, we really are in a point where we have to activate our citizens. They're brilliant, they've got great ideas, we need to give them platforms, we need to support them to have a voice, to really strengthen our global partnerships and focus in on some of the big issues that threaten our species and our planet. We've committed through our programme in Coventry to co-creating our programme with our communities. So everything we do is the authentic voice of our citizens and really thinking about our identity and promoting that. So I've always felt that purely putting on an artist-led programme where we just ask artists to think, what would you like to do? What's the art you want to put on? Isn't the right approach at this moment in time for our programme. Instead, I want to be led and inspired by what they're doing in Melbourne and invite artists to come and work with us to tackle some of the big issues that we face in our city and to bring their pioneering creativity to really make some change happen. And I suppose as the kind of climate change reality is sweeping the country and the globe, how we can galvanise some new connections, and specifically in our city with our grassroots movements who really care about the natural world and our planet and who become our real partners in this. So a big part of our programme over the next 5 years, peaking in 2021, will be to look at what role our programme will play in activating people around these big issues. As I mentioned before, people in our city, they're already active about peace, around poverty and homelessness. They're already pioneering green industries as well. We're creating new electric black cabs, which are going into London. We're leading on smart battery technology. But I suppose, one of my questions is, how can we mainstream some of the big issues that are facing our planet so that people in our city can put into action some everyday actions that really can start to make some change happen? I suppose it's a bit like, what's our 5 a day for climate emergency? How do we really enable people to kind of act as they believe? And I suppose as a trust, of course, we want to create a fantastic celebration in 21, but equally we're committed to ensuring there's a really strong social conscience to our programme and that we engage fully with the big issues of our time. And so really thinking about our convening power and our influencing ability to really deliver some positive outcomes. So just in terms of some of the things we're looking at, I suppose we want to think about how we really ignite social activism and reconnect our communities with our natural landscapes and our natural heritage, grow some of our social connections, our green knowledge and skills, and build a real appetite for shared stories and locally grown food and a more sustainable culture in the city. And our environmental response really is to think about how we inspire a modern and diverse city like ours to reimagine a green future for wildlife as well as for human life. We want to invest in transformational initiatives that really protect and develop our natural environment, but enable our diverse communities to share stories and resources, to really think about health and well-being. There are major connections there. And of course, we want to lead an ambitious programme working with artists that's environmentally charged and responsible, and that we can work at a citywide scale across a lot of different locations to nurture partnerships and really increase pride and create some long-term change. So we want to invite artists to come to Coventry and think of us as a test bed, to come and help us to reinvent and reimagine the future. We want to nurture a new wave of environmental artists from across the region who'll be working alongside industry leaders in the city through our Green Artist Lab and subsequent artist-led commissioning programmes that might come from that. And we're very mindful about when we're doing these big cultural programs, the impact that event management and production has on the environment. So really thinking about how we can create an event management system that really looks at minimizing the impact. And one of the things we've done in our budget is to look at carbon offset budget lines. So wherever we see an increase in our carbon footprint, really thinking about an offsetting practice so that we start to behave in a carbon neutral way. And coming out of this, we're developing an environmental climate plan for the city, which will be driven by artists and the cultural sector, but really engages with our citizens and driven with them, so that we make sure that we operate as we go ahead within ecological limits. And this is really difficult and something that's very aspirational, but of course, this is our chance to influence and do something different. And we hope coming out of this will be a new Coventry Green Code, which will be part of our legacy. We're also really thinking about the circular economy and kind of what that looks and feels like within all of the work we do, and again, how we can influence that. And we've got a big focus on collective power. So really, as a city, working together, how we can make big change a reality. I was really taken by Bristol's Guardians of Grub that I was reading in The Guardian recently, where city professionals are pioneering new ways around tackling food waste. And I think this is something that we can be inspired by as we really think about what is our collective power around these issues. And we're looking at lots of collaborations to really think about tourism and what that looks like and how we create more of an eco-tourism policy. Overall, I suppose, this is a time to act. Everybody has said it. Time is against us. And I think there's a chance for us to use this major programme to tackle some of the concerns with the system that we live in and change the way that we live and create some new solutions around that. I just wanted to tell you a very quick story about a group of brilliant people from Coventry. So in 1972, a group of friends who all worked in Coventry across different industries came together because they were really concerned about overpopulation and the impact this would have over the world. Some of the key people that came together, and they formed this group called the Club of 13, and some great people in that club, Tony, Leslie, Frida, Michael, they decided it was time to have a voice on the political stage, and so they set up a new party called People, and People created the first edition of the Manifesto for Sustainable Society, a background, a statement of policies that were inspired by a blueprint for survival. And the main focus of the party was a focus on zero growth, because they really saw growth as the main issue that would cause lots of long-term problems for the planet. So People then changed its name to the more descriptive Ecology Party in the mid-70s, and a decade later that party became the Green Party. So I suppose what I'm saying is Coventry is a place of movements. We're moved by the need to take action and to create a better world, and this is why at this crucial time in the world our programme must have a strong social conscience. It's unlikely that our city will have anywhere near the resources we're going to have for 2021 or the spotlight that we'll get. So now is the time to really use this to make lasting positive change. You know, we're based in this city, Coventry, inspired by the creation of the Green Party. So we're really committed to connecting people and really thinking of our environment. And I suppose this is an open call to artists across the country to come and work with us and really make a difference and effect some change. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Chenine. Very positive. Now, my clever IT panellists are hoping to join us into London.
Yeah, we're there.
Well, we're there. It's amazing. In Waterstones, I believe, cafe on Trafalgar Square. So we can't see the
Hello.
It's okay. You won't be able to.
Hi.
They are there. Okay. It's
So
difficult.
I don't know if anybody can hear me.
We can hear you. I can't see you personally unless I turn round, and then I can't talk, but I'll do my best. And who have we got there? Ruth? Just Ruth at the moment, or is the Fehinti there as well?
I'm in Trafalgar Square.
Say hi.
And then my colleagues are there in Waterstones.
Okay, so Ruth, over to you. We can hear you.
Hello. Hello, everybody. I'm Ruth Ben-Tovim. I'm an associate with Encounters Arts and also part of Catalysing Culture Declares Emergency. And we're here live in Trafalgar Square right at the moment. And it's on the Saturday of Extinction Rebellion. And here we are. And I think that the part of the idea was to be here live, connecting with you there in Bristol. In Between Time Festival has also declared climate and ecological an emergency, which is amazing. And really all of this week, many different creative expressions have been born here on this site. And this feels like a huge site for creativity, for that unleashing of the artists in all of us to gather together to take action that is creative and also that is powerful at the same time. And so we thought that we would start our bit of the panel looking at artists' role in the climate emergency from Trafalgar Square. Here we are, and I'm going to just be making my way back to Waterstones, but we wanted to bring you some of this live energy of hundreds and thousands of people who've been here this week, all different ages. And what's been so powerful is to see so much creativity popping up, from the stages at night to letters to the earth popping up around the place, to writers' rebellions, to singing in the streets, to young people getting involved, to kind of large-scale choreographed events and action that can happen. And this feels like this is a site for activation. And also just to say that today is a day of grief and mourning for all that's lost already. And you can hear a lot of noise here because the police are taking down one of the last structures. And some young people have been sitting up here for 2 days and accompanied by singing and music. So that idea of the heart of creativity and expression feels really important. And that would be really good to talk about our role as artists and activators in these times. But I'm going to make my way back to Waterstones, and I'm going to hand over to Fehinti Balogun, who's an actor and activist, to take over while I make my way back. Over to you.
Hello?
Hello. Hello.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can.
Oh, great. Okay. I guess I'll talk then.
Please do.
It's really funny being called an actor and activist, because I never really thought of myself as an actor very recently. My life was incredibly different a year ago, which I think I'll sort of tell you about now, actually. The thing with what I was supposed to talk about is about sort of like getting your house and all the future, but I don't think I want to talk about that, actually. I think I want to talk about sort of restructuring the way your house is moving, or the way I've done it myself. So, as I was introduced, my name is Fehinti Balogun. I am a British Nigerian, born in South London. And I was born into a single parent household, so that's myself, my mum, and my brother. And we didn't really grow up with a lot of money. We didn't have very much. My mum had to work hard, worked a few jobs, wanted to have a house and somewhere to live and things to eat. And that's the same for millions of families around the UK. Very much low-income families in a very hard position. So to pay back my mum for her hard work, I decided to become an actor, which honestly for me seemed like the right thing to do. I felt like I could take care of my family with the success from acting. It seems like my culture teaches me that that's possible, and I thought it's something I could do. So in my head, I had this idea that I would be a one-track success, an actor, and that's all I'll ever be. I learned about climate crisis. And I learned that all my ideals of what the future would be were sort of based on a crumbling foundation, and that the people I'm trying to protect with my success weren't being protected at all. I mean, the world that my mum was already trying to live with is crumbling itself, and she was already finding it difficult. So I was sort of plunged into like a very deep, dark anxiety. Plunged into a very deep, dark anxiety, and I wasn't sure what to do. And then the debates turned up this year, the first climate debate in 2 years, where we were encouraged to write to our MPs and bring them along. So I went on to WhatsApp and Twitter, and I encouraged all of my friends, write to MPs, make sure they're there, please, please, please. And nothing happened. We had 40 out of 650 MPs turn up, and for me, I snapped. I realised that they weren't going to do something, and it made my job as an actor feel very small. I remember I was at the time doing a job in Bath, and I thought, why am I acting in a play in Bath when my family is quite literally in danger and has no idea what's coming? So I joined Extinction Rebellion. I did what all the best people do when they join. I did the admin work for about 3 weeks. And it was difficult because that's not creatively what I've been called to do. And it was at the very same time that I realised that the spaces that I was in and the people I was surrounded by often don't look like me, and often aren't encouraged to think about people that look like me. Their experiences are very different. So my life, my surrounding, my work, and my experience was calling me to be something more, to restructure the idea of what I thought I was. No longer could I just be Fehinti the actor, but I was encouraged to be Fehinti the activist, Fehinti the creative, Fehinti the citizen, Fehinti the human, all these different facets of myself that I didn't know I was capable of being. So I took all this conversation and anxiety, and I restructured and wrote a lecture. I put people of colour at the heart of that lecture in order to be seen. Because we do care, people of colour and people of low income, we just haven't been given the time or the representation to do anything about it. So in my particular situation, I was able to talk about that, to go to communities and bring them to the forefront of this conversation, to create safe spaces for people to discuss and talk and come up with solutions, because they haven't been put in that room before. So I realised again that I was more than what I thought I could be. And I realised I was in a position to challenge the powers that had already been there, to do more, to represent more. If you look around you right now and in the businesses, the places that you've been, who is not here? Who could be here? Who could you bring to the forefront? That's what I've sort of challenged myself in, knowing that I'm in a privileged position to talk, to be here, and to also bring those people in. So that's the challenge I sort of studied on. I can only really ask everybody here to do that. To think about who they can give the floor to, what voices haven't been heard, who can be seen that isn't seen. We're all in the position of power and privilege to do something. It's our sort of right to realise that, do something about it. So yeah, that's me. Yeah, I'm gonna pass you over to the next manager.